parents is one of the fact that our children will disappoint us. Our children will go astray. Our children will do things that we can't possibly imagine them doing. But we've got to be like Jesus. We've got to be like Jesus, regardless of what they do, regardless of how far away they go home, they go from home. I remember, I don't know, some of you, probably Peace can identify with me on this. Some of you that have ever heard one of Kirk Franklin's son, he was speaking to Keziah, one of his child, one day at the beginning of the song, and he said to the child, he said, "Let me tell you something. I want you to know that no matter how far away you go, you can always come back home. You can always come back home." That's the love of parents to their children. And that's the same love that God has for me and for you. And that's the same love we've got to have for our children, because we're very quick sometimes to cast them away as soon as they're not following the norms, as soon as they're not following the things that we've laid down or the expectations that we want from them. If only, remember, it's this same David that said, if the Lord was marking iniquity, which one of us would be standing? None. But his loving kindness is forevermore. Every day is forgiving me and you. And that's the same thing we've got to learn to do for our children. We've got to love them regardless of what they've done, where they've been, or, who they've walked with. We've got to have that unfailing love for our children. We've got to let them know, like the prodigal father did, that stood there, and the Bible said he was looking every day afar, that peradventure my son will come back today. That's the same way, and that's why we're standing in the gap, and that's why we're praying for them day by day, that even if we've already got it wrong, even if that child has gone wayward, even if we think all hope is lost, we shouldn't give up like the prodigal father. We should stand there still looking out, and with this prayer, praying for them, interceding that God will touch them and they will have a turnaround 360, and they will come back and realize that they have left a place of love, a place of comfort, a place where they will be nourished and they will be cherished any time of the day. That's one thing, if as parents, we should be able to take away from here. I know it's hard. It's very hard. It's very hard to love a child that everything you do just doesn't seem to be right. Every attempt you're making just seems to be falling on deaf ears. But one thing I keep saying, imagine that's the same thing that God is doing for me and you every day. And he never gives up. He never gets tired. The Bible says God is slow to be angry. He could have wiped the whole earth away by now. But no, it's because he does not want me or you, any of us, to perish. And that's why Jesus left his throne in heaven and he came down and became a wanderer, so that me and you can have life and we can have it more abundantly. And that's the same grace, that's the same favor, that's the same mercy, that's the same attention and details we've got to give to the life of our children if we want to see them being the best that they could possibly be. And I pray that as we do this, that the Lord will enable us. But like I said, finally, this young man is dead. So now we see what? We see that the David mourning for his child. And like I said, then Zadok, okay, like I said, Zadok's son Ahimaaz said, "Let me run to the king with the good news." Well, I don't know how that is good news, but only him can explain. With the good news that the Lord has rescued him from his enemies. No, I mean, who's going to go and tell a father that it's a good news that your son is dead? No matter how bad the child is, that's not good news. And that's exactly what Joab said to him. He says, no. Joab told him, it wouldn't be good news to the king. This is his son that is dead. You can be my messenger another time, but not today. Then Joab said to a man from Ethiopia, go tell the king what you have seen. The man bowed and ran off. And either way, Ahimaaz, for one reason, like I said earlier, still pestered Joab that he wanted to go and tell David the news. And finally, Joab gave in. Although the Ethiopian guy left before Ahimaaz, Ahimaaz obviously was well grounded in the area. He got ahead. He got to David ahead of the Ethiopian messenger. And when he got to David, David finally said, what happened? He said, oh, finally, my lord, we have peace. Everything is sorted. Then David asked him the golden question. is Absalom my son dead? And he couldn't answer the question. He now said, oh, the time when I left, when Joab sent me, there was a lot of commotion, so I don't really know. Now, isn't that lie? Isn't that deception? He knew that Absalom was already dead. And that's why I said, I really don't understand why he wanted. Number one, he's been told it's not good news, but he still wanted to go. Now he gets to the king, and the king says, is my son alive? And you say you don't know because you left in the middle of a commotion. Then what did you go there to do? And while he was still talking, the Ethiopian guy turned up. And David addressed the Ethiopian guy. He asked Ahimaaz to step to one side, and he spoke to the Ethiopian guy. And when he spoke to the Ethiopian guy, this is what he said. He said, then Ahimaaz cried out to the king. Everything is all right. He bowed before the king. What about Absalom? The king demanded. Is he all right? Ahimaaz replied. When Joab told me to come here, there was a lot of commotion, but I didn't know what was happening. Wait here, the king said to him. So Ahimaaz stepped aside. Then the man from Ethiopia arrived and said, I have good news for my lord, the king. Today, the Lord has rescued you from all those who rebelled against you. What about young Absalom? The king demanded. Is he all right? And the Ethiopian replied, may all of your enemies, my lord the king, both now and in the future, share the fate of that young man. Diplomacy. He didn't actually say he died. He just say your enemies now and forevermore share the faith. In paradox, parable. That's how he spoke to the king. And David got the message. And guess what happened next? In 33, the king was overcome with emotion. He went up to the room over the gateway and burst into tears. And as he went, he cried, oh, my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Let's pause for a minute and just reflect. Did you hear what David said there? David was ready to lay down his life for that child that rebelled against him. How many of us would have done that? How many? That's what we see. And that's why I said we have finally come to the conclusion, because now Absalom is dead. From here henceforth, all we see is how David reclaims his throne and goes back to the city of Jerusalem and continues his reign. But when we started all this, the reason we came here was because God was asking us to bind and to cast out the spirit of Absalom that's hovering over the lives of our children. And in order for us to do that, we needed to know what spirit it was that we were dealing with. So obviously where we are today. So in conclusion, for today, many of the points that I have is like a reflection on every character or every things that we've seen in the past chapters that we have seen Absalom do to his father David. And that's what we're going to be dealing with some of us that's already seen the one that I posted, our prayer that I posted out earlier about 6 hours ago on Facebook. That's what I put, like about 8 or 9 points, I can't remember, reflecting back on who Absalom was, the pain and the grief that he brought to people along the way, to his father especially. I also find it interesting, unless his mother was dead, we didn't hear anything, mention about the reaction of Absalom's mother whatsoever. The closest we got to the mother was when he ran to his mother's side after killing his half brother, and that was it. We never heard anything more about that. So if she was alive, I can imagine the grief, the pain she would have gone through as well. She probably, as a mother, would have tried at one point to speak to him, to tell him to do the right thing and that what he's doing is wrong. But obviously, if she did, we can see it didn't work. And I'm praying for our children today that that will not be their lot in the name of Jesus. So, one of our prayer, the first prayer is that none of us will have any reason to bury our children. I know David did not bury his child himself, but the child died before him. The child died in a battle that he instigated and orchestrated and gave order and command to go and do. And one other sad part that I think I need to mention is that after Absalom died, after Absalom died, he was just chucked into a pit. This is a prince. His body was just chucked into a pit somewhere, and stones and rubbles were heaped upon it, and that was it. He didn't even get a befitting burial as a prince, as a child of a king. He didn't get it. And even if he was a king for a little while, during his rebellious days or years, you would have thought at least maybe they would try and bring his body home and, as a child of the king. No, not at all. His body was just dug into a pit and thrown in, and they just heaped stones on it in the forest, and that was it. That was it. I'm trying to find it so that we can see that I didn't make it up. After when he died, that they didn't bother to give him a befitting burial at all, and that goes to tell you how um, how bad the situation must have been for them not to even have bothered to even take his body back to